The Kabbalah. As understood today, the word Kabbalah means a tradition or that which is received. It also means a very specific system of metaphysics. But in the ancient world, Kabbalah had a more general meaning, that of the law. It could mean an oral law, or it could be the law of Moses in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, called the Pentateuch in Greek. It was not until the 12th century that the term assumed today's precise meaning. There are 2 separate schools of Kabbalah, that of Judaism, and that which is the product of Italian Renaissance thought, termed the Hermetic Kabbalah. A difficulty may arise here in that in any form of Kabbalism, God names are those of the Old Testament, Hebrew is the essential language, and the primary texts are those of the Jewish tradition. Nevertheless, while Jewish and Hermetic Kabbalah refer to the same literary sources, there are striking differences in both textual interpretation and practical work. The most significant difference has to do with pictorial representation. Mosaic law forbids showing the human form. It is likewise forbidden to draw a picture of a man, even only the face of a man. However, only a full face is forbidden, that is, when it has 2 eyes and a nose, but a profile is not forbidden. Idolatry of any sort was a sacrilege, which may explain the reluctance of some Jewish scholars to use even the Tree of Life in their publications. But more important, when a Christian mystic or Hermetic Kabbalist will produce a pictorial vision as a stepping-off point for inner exploration, the Jewish mystic seeks a direct experience of pure consciousness. There are, of course, myriad other differences between Jewish and Hermetic Kabbalists, not the least of which is the way in which the divine names are applied. All of these differences are best understood in terms of the historical development of Western occultism. It was around the 2nd century AD that the Western mystery tradition began to emerge, although presumably based on elements handed down from a very ancient and secret oral tradition. Origins of the Kabbalah. A great many Kabbalistic works, even today, make the claim that the Kabbalah of esoteric knowledge given to Moses on Mount Sinai, thus linking it to the very inception of Jewish law. The suggestion is that God dictated the 5 books of the Bible to Moses and then provided a secret key for their interpretation. Another tradition, popularized in the 15th century, and the one taught by the Golden Dawn to its members, stated that the Kabbalah was first provided by angels to Adam as the means of return after the fall. MacGregor Mathers quoted from Christian Ginsburg in his introduction to the Kabbalah Unveiled. The Kabbalah was first taught by God himself to a select company of angels who formed a theosophic school in paradise. After the fall, the angels most graciously communicated this heavenly doctrine to the disobedient child of earth to furnish the protoplasts with the means of returning to their pristine nobility and felicity. From Adam it passed over to Noah and then to Abraham, the friend of God, who emigrated with it to Egypt, where the patriarch allowed a portion of this mysterious doctrine to ooze out. It was in this way that the Egyptians obtained some knowledge of it, and the other Eastern nations could introduce it into their philosophical systems. Moses, who was learned in all the wisdom of Egypt, was first initiated into the Kabbalah in the land of his birth, but became most proficient in it during his wanderings in the wilderness, when he not only devoted to it the leisure hours of the whole 40 years, but received lessons in it from one of the angels. By the aid of this mysterious science, the lawgiver was enabled to solve the difficulties which arose during his management of the Israelites, in spite of the pilgrimages, wars, and frequent miseries of the nation. He covertly laid down the principles of this secret doctrine in the first 4 books of the Pentateuch, but withheld them from Deuteronomy. It is perhaps sad, but this charming story bears no relationship to historical fact, the Kabbalah having emerged as the result of a long and complex developmental sequence, beginning with Merkaba mysticism. Merkaba, meaning chariot, was the earliest form of Jewish mysticism, preceding the Kabbalah. The chariot was that which carried the throne of God as described by the prophet Ezekiel, the throne world, to which the Jewish mystic aspired, being the counterpart of the early mysteries of Hermeticism and Christian Gnosticism. The 2nd century witnessed a merger of a great many trends, and Shalom states flatly that the Kabbalah in its historical significance can be defined as the product of the interpenetration of Jewish Gnosticism and Neoplatonism. In the late Roman early Christian period were found Christian Gnosticism, Jewish Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, Neo-Pythagoreanism, Hermeticism, Pseudo-Egyptian religion, and many obscure cults, all interpenetrating in subtle ways. Jewish mysticism of this time is discussed by Shalom in his pioneering study, Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism, while the Christian developments have been chronicled, in a readable way, by Elaine Pagels in the Gnostic Gospels. These scholars trace the actual sources of ideas, disputed for generations, which are the basis of the modern Hermetic Kabbalah. What is important to recognize is that one need not invoke the smokescreen of secret oral tradition in most aspects of the mysteries. The majority of those who have contributed to the Kabbalah have been very explicit about their work and its sources. There is very little in any modern system for which historical precedent cannot be found. The Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Formation. This book of 6 very brief chapters, dating from some time between the 3rd and the 6th centuries AD, is the cornerstone of Kabbalistic literature and the document in which the word Sephrith first appears. It is a work which describes the creation of the universe in terms of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, terms of symbolic number undoubtedly related to Neo-Pythagoreanism. The Sefer Yetzirah is apparently a summation of earlier ideas in Jewish mysticism, similar in form to Gnosticism and the Pistis Sophia. The precise origin and intention of the Sefer Yetzirah is a matter of speculation. One writer of the early 1900s, with all good intentions, even suggested that this mystical text was no more than a book of grammar, and as the earliest Hebrew grammar, contains not only the fundamental rules of Hebrew orthography, but also an account of the origin of letters and numerals. Of course, this theory is not to be taken seriously, but it does demonstrate the extremes of interpretation to which Kabbalistic documents have been subjected. On the other hand, the Sefer Yetzirah is a very difficult and obtuse work, so abstract that it demands an approach atypical of that taken to most literature. And, when used in concert with the Tarot, the work becomes remarkably comprehensible. Ideally, the Sefer Yetzirah should be read in the original Hebrew, but a number of translations have been made into English. It should also be noted that a later document entitled The 32 Paths of Wisdom is usually included with the Sefer Yetzirah. Medieval Kabbalism. The Sefer Yetzirah set the stage for much later Jewish mysticism by amalgamating various mystical currents into a Jewish context. Called the earliest extant Hebrew text of systematic, speculative thought, its ideas were built upon by later scholars. For example, where the very word Sephrith was originally used to mean simply numbers or numerical stages in creation, in the Middle Ages, that word came to mean a specific system of divine emanation. One of the most important ideas to be added by late medieval scholars was that numerological links could be found between words, and thus between concepts, using gematria. The introduction of gematria served two purposes. First, it helped to assure that scribes would spell names precisely as received. Second, it tended to serve as an incentive for serious meditation on the names. Sometime between 1150 and 1200, in southern France, another very important Kabbalist work appeared. This was the Sefer HaBahar, supposedly an ancient work, but more likely edited from several works of either German or Eastern origin. The Bahar contains the first reference to a secret tree and is the first to describe the Sephrith as the vessels of divine light. An English translation of the work, by Arya Kaplan, has recently been published. The 13th century was especially pivotal for the Jewish Kabbalah. It was during this time that Isaac the Blind, a scholar from Narbonne, wrote his comments on the Sefer Yetzirah, first describing it as involving a systematic development of Sephrith. He also built upon some of the ideas expressed in the Bahar, as did others in his day. The result of study of the Sefer Yetzirah in terms of the Bahar was that scholars began to discuss the 10 Sephrith and the 32 paths together. Another major idea, appearing at this time in France and Spain, was that there were evil Sephrith existing as exact counterparts to the good. This concept was extensively developed by some of the adepts of the Golden Dawn fraternity. It was in this climate of mystical intellectual fruition that the greatest of all Kabbalah treatises appeared. The Zohar was the work of Moses de Leon, between 1280 and 1286. It is a series of commentaries on the Bible and on mystical cosmology. For generations the Zohar was believed to be an ancient work. The text itself purports to have been written by a 2nd century rabbi, Simeon ben Yohai. Moreover, the Zohar is written primarily in ancient Aramaic, a language which is the root of both Hebrew and Arabic. Presumably, Moses de Leon felt that his work would be taken more seriously if attributed to an ancient author. He was probably correct, for the Zohar quickly assumed major proportions as the document of Jewish mysticism. It should be added that between approximately 1500 and 1800, the Kabbalah was widely considered to be the true essence of Jewish theology, rather than the curiosity that it is today among Jews. Unfortunately, the Zohar has never been translated completely into a European language. The 5-volume English set by Maurice Simon and Harry Sperling is competent, but represents only about 35% of the work. The translators chose to eliminate those parts which they believed to be later additions or unduly obscure. Three of those omitted texts are, however, to be found in the Kabbalah Unveiled, translated from Noor van Rosenroth's Latin Kabbalah Denne Data of 1677, and which includes a brilliant introduction by MacGregor Mathers. The texts in question are among the most difficult of the Zohar. They are the Book of Concealed Mystery, the Greater Holy Assembly and the Lesser Holy Assembly. There is only one complete translation into a modern language, and that is Hebrew. The 21-volume translation and commentary by the late Yehuda Ashlag is described by Shalom as an extremely literal translation, but not without many textual misunderstandings. The Renaissance, Hermeticism and Christian Kabbalah. The key to the modern Hermetic Kabbalah is the Renaissance mind which blended Jewish Kabbalah and Hermetic mysteries. During this period of intense intellectual activity, philosophers encountered previously hidden currents of Jewish mysticism and attempted to adapt these ideas to a Christian framework. It was even asserted that through the Kabbalah one could most effectively prove the divinity of Christ. The Renaissance was a time when man considered himself the jewel in a universal crown. He was the measure of all things, rather than the lowly sinner atoning for the fall, as had been insisted by medieval dogma. Thus, intellectual and creative activity, a constant questioning of principles, came to be of greater importance than the institutionalized values of the past. In more basic terms, one can say that what had been a church-dominated society became secularized. The beliefs and feelings of the medieval period were supplanted by the call for a more rational overview of the human condition. The society was nominally Christian, but theologians and philosophers had a very free hand. This freedom to doubt and explore some of the most basic principles of Christianity reached its high point at the Medici Academy in Florence. In fact, virtually all modern occultism can be traced back to the developments of scholars in that time and place. The Medici were a family of immense wealth, ruling Florence from the 15th century until 1737. Their primary contribution was as patrons of the arts, a program begun by Cosimo, the first of the great Medici, and continued by Lorenzo the Magnificent, patron to Leonardo, Michelangelo and Machiavelli. Cosimo de' Medici was the founder of the Platonic Academy, dedicated to the study of Greek philosophy and a center of Neoplatonic ideas. This was an open think tank, much like today's Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton University. Cosimo was a passionate collector of manuscripts, and when in 1460 a Greek manuscript of the Hermetica came to him from Macedonia, he judged it to be of unique importance. The reputation of Hermes Trismegistus's work as providing a key to all knowledge was so considerable that Cosimo instructed Marsilio Ficino, director of his academy, to put aside Plato's Republic and Symposium and translate the Hermetica first. Early Renaissance philosophers believed that in these documents they had the core ideas of the most ancient Egyptian religion, which would lead them to the very source of illumination. Their awestruck approach and belief in the utter integrity of these papers was the foundation of Renaissance magic and a whole school of Neoplatonism. It was these ideas which preceded the Kabbalistic philosophy soon after flowing into the Medici Academy. What is known as the Christian Kabbalah was also a development of the Medici Academy and the primary accomplishment of Pico della Mirandola, one of the court's intellectual luminaries. It was Pico who had the major Kabbalistic texts translated into Latin. And it was Pico who, in his 72 Kabbalistic conclusions, part of his 900 theses, made the claim that no science can better convince us of the divinity of Jesus Christ than magic and the Kabbalah. Pico's 14th Kabbalistic principle stated that adding the Hebrew letter, shin, to the divine name Yod, He, Vau, He, and producing Jeheshua, Hebrew name of Jesus, made it possible to pronounce the unpronounceable name of God. And, from the standpoint of the modem Hermetic Kabbalah and the Golden Dawn, this is of special significance. Perhaps the most important single principle emphasized by today's Hermetic Kabbalah is that all things are four elements activated by a fifth, which is spirit. Yod is fire, He is water, Vau is air, He, final is earth and Shin is spirit. Pico inspired the work of Johannes Reuchlin, the first non-Jew ever to write books on the Kabbalah. His premise was that the history of mankind is based on three periods. In the first period God revealed himself to the Jewish patriarchs through the threefold name Shaddai. The second period was that of Moses in the Talmud, when God appeared as the four-lettered name Tetragrammaton. Finally, came the period of man's redemption through Christ, when God revealed himself as the five-lettered Jeheshua. Thus Pico della Mirandola and Johannes Reuchlin became the founders of the philosophical aspects of Christian Kabbalism. The first practical work of their school was produced by Henry Cornelius Agrippa, whose De Occult Philosophia of 1531 was widely read. It is, however, Agrippa who is responsible for the very negative association of Kabbalah with witchcraft and sorcery, a belief held by many even today. All of these literary works had been stimulated by social developments in the West. Much of the intellectual current of the 15th century can be traced to the conquest of the Byzantine Empire by the Turks in 1453 and the subsequent migration of Greek scholars to Italy. A similar trend occurred in 1492 when the Jews were expelled from Spain, and many Jewish scholars also settled in Italy, moving onto ground prepared for them by Pico with his theses of 1486. There was widespread interest in Hebrew mysticism by the end of the century, and advocates of the Christian Kabbalah included important Catholic prelates and theologians who viewed the Kabbalah as a vehicle for the intellectual renewal of the faith. Thus the Christian Kabbalah, merged with elements of Hermeticism, came to be the primary occult current of the Italian Renaissance. The Renaissance attitude toward the Hermetic sciences was jolted sharply approximately 100 years later when Isaac Casaubon declared the Hermetica an early Christian forgery, rather than an ancient Egyptian document. He stated that the books were written by a Christian or semi-Christian in an attempt to make these doctrines acceptable to the Gentiles. Casaubon's work brought about a significant decline of interest in magic, a generally acceptable Renaissance pursuit until his revelations. Today it is understood that the Hermetic documents are not specific forgeries, but that they were produced even later than Casaubon believed. Despite Casaubon's overwhelming evidence, some writers, including Robert Fludd and Athanasius Kircher, chose to ignore historical reality and continued to declare the Hermetic fragments the work of an ancient Egyptian adept named Hermes Trismegistus. Magus to the Queen. The next important figure we encounter is Dr. John Dee, 1527–1608, the great Elizabethan philosopher who, with Edward Kelly, developed the system of Enochian magic, later expanded by MacGregor Mathers. Dee shared the ideas of men such as Pico della Mirandola and Agrippa, and could be considered their English counterpart. Moreover, like the Italian metaphysicians, he enjoyed the protection of the royal court, being an advisor and confidant to Queen Elizabeth. Dee produced two works of major importance in the history of occultism. The first was his hieroglyphic monad, an obtuse treatise of spiritual alchemy and mathematics. The second was his True and Faithful Relation, in which he records his work with Edward Kelly, as they are given the Enochian system by spirits. This is a surprisingly fresh and interesting book despite its ponderous 17th century style, and includes such gems as the decision of the two researchers to exchange wives. Both works were important to the development of the modern Hermetic Kabbalah. The hieroglyphic monad provided the philosophical foundation for the ideas of Johann Valentine André, author of at least one of the Rosicrucian allegories, to which the Golden Dawn traced its beginnings. And the ideas of the True and Faithful Relation were tremendously expanded by Mathers, who went so far as to develop an Enochian chess set. This latter is virtually unknown, but is deeply linked with the tarot and is considered by some to be the most potent divinatory device ever invented. Mathers used Egyptian god forms on four boards derived from the tablets illustrated by Dee, thus incorporating Hermetic ideas, probably through Fludd, into Dee's system. Rosicrucianism. Rosicrucianism, developed in Bohemia in the early 17th century, appears to be the direct result of John Dee's travels through Germany in 1589. There are three key works of Rosicrucian philosophy. The first of these works is the Fama Fraternitas, written in German and originally published, though circulating in manuscript for perhaps 4 years earlier, in 1614. The Fama Fraternitas, or a discovery of the fraternity of the most noble order of the Rose Cross, tells the story of a mysterious Christian Rosenkreutz and his fraternity, dedicated to healing the sick. The text particularly describes the discovery of Christian Rosenkreutz's tomb, the vault which was the inspiration for the Sanctum Sanctorum, used by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Paul Foster Case had such a vault painted for his Boda, and many others may still exist today. The legend states that his body was found perfectly preserved, holding the book T, which has been symbolically connected with the tarot. A second work, expanding on the Fama Fraternitas, appeared 2 years later in 1616. This was the Confessio Fraternitas, or the Confession of the Laudable Fraternity of the Most Honorable Order of the Rosy Cross, written to all the learned of Europe. Unlike the Fama, which appeared in the vernacular German, the Confessio is in Latin and clearly aimed at a more intellectual reader. The author of these two works is unknown. However, a third major work, closely connected with the Fama and the Confessio, was written by Johann Valentine André. A cloud has long covered the chemical wedding of 1616, due to André's later claim that this work of his youth was only a joke. Confusion may arise in that the text is unquestionably a serious and enlightened religious tract. As Rudolf Steiner wrote on his essay on the chemical wedding, anyone who knows what the human soul experiences when it has opened the gates into the spiritual world need only read a few pages of The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz of the year 1459 to recognize that the descriptions given in this book are based upon genuine spiritual experience. Frances Yates tries to clear up the mystery with a few words. She notes that in discussing his work, Andri used the Latin word ludibrium, which means a mockery or a sport. He spoke of the ludibrium of the vain fama, or the ludibrium of the fictitious Rosicrucian fraternity. But Yates proposes that in the 17th century the word could also mean a play or a comic fiction, and that Andri was suggesting that Rosicrucianism was theatrical in a positive and educational sense. Our intention here is not to inundate the reader with the weighty theorems of literary research, only to make clear the controversy which surrounds so many of the occult documents which have contributed to the system of Hermetic Qabalah. Later Rosicrucians. Robert Flood, as we have mentioned, was one of those who insisted on promulgating the Renaissance idea of Hermes Trismegistus as ancient Egyptian adept. Another was the German Michael Mayer. Flood significantly furthered the idea that an actual Rosicrucian brotherhood existed and seems to have believed it himself, though admitting that he had never actually met a Rosicrucian. Flood combined Hermeticism and light of the Rosicrucian manifestos and the developments of John D. He is therefore one of the major precursors of Mathers and the modern Hermetic Qabalah. Hermetic Kabbalistic deceptions. The question of purposeful deception about the origins of many esoteric manuscripts is a serious and difficult one, usually judiciously avoided by writers on the occult who wish to cast their beliefs in the most positive light. But the tally of literature for which antiquity is falsely claimed is so great that the very consistency of such claims becomes intriguing. The Hermetica, written by a Greek and widely dated 3rd century to the Renaissance by scholars but believed to be the original documents of ancient Egyptian religion. The Zohar, purported to be the work of a rabbi in the early Christian period, yet actually by a 13th century writer whose claim of antiquity for it gave the book's greater importance. The Rosicrucian manifestos, an invention of Johann Valentine Andri and others. Neither a Christian Rosenkreutz nor the mysterious Rosicrucians ever existed. The ancient cipher manuscripts of the Golden Dawn, a fragmentary system of supposedly ancient rituals, but an unquestionable forgery. To this list add some of Blavatsky's work, including the infamous Mahatma letters, and perhaps the stanzas of Dizon on which she based her massive work, The Secret Doctrine. In all such cases of fakery, deception, or whatever it may be called, we find authors under pressure of the public's essential belief that the more traditional a work, the more valid it is. On the other hand, every one of those works which we have listed here as having fraudulent origins claimed for it stands on its own as enlightened. These are the inspired works of men and women who have known. Manifestations of the psychology involved occurs repeatedly in all aspects of the study of the mysteries, even with Paul Foster Case. When the Book of Tokens appeared in 1934, Case prefaced it saying, "We do not know the name of the author. Internal evidence in the text suggests that he may have been one of the later Kabbalists. Perhaps he knew the tarot, perhaps not." Today, Case's organization publishes the Book of Tokens as Case's own work, responding to inquiries about the discrepancy in attribution of authorship that was a very modest man. But if history is any indicator, it is more likely that Case felt that the work of some anonymous later Kabbalist would be received more positively than a work of his own. The point we are trying to make here is that rather than running from the obvious fact that the Hermetic Qabalah is based on many fabricated claims, history should be faced directly. In fact, the very fabrications are a pattern which, ironically, tends to point us toward the inner legitimacy of the works. Those who remain unconvinced that a work of spurious pedigree might have great spiritual worth should look very closely at the history of Christianity, as well as that peculiar amalgam of heterogeneous texts, the Bible, Hermetic Qabalah and the Golden Dawn. In view of the evidence that Rosicrucianism, though high spiritual allegory, was a 17th century myth, the Golden Dawn history lesson incorporated into its Adeptus Minor ritual of initiation is interesting. It begins, "Know, then, O aspirant, that the mysteries of the rose and the cross have existed from time immemorial, and that the rites were practiced, and the wisdom taught, in Egypt, Eleusis, Samothrace, Persia, Chaldea and India, and in far more ancient lands." The ceremony continues to directly paraphrase the description of the life of Christian Rosenkreutz in the Fama Fraternitas. It is probable that most of the members of the order believed that Christian Rosenkreutz had been an actual person, and that the Golden Dawn was in a direct line from his fraternity. Whether Mathers and Westcott understood the real history is another matter entirely. There are many instances of both having accepted traditional misattributions of mystical literature. Westcott, for example, wrote an introduction to the Chaldean oracles of Zoroaster, describing them as embodying many of the principal features of Chaldean philosophy. We know that the oracles were actually written by Julianus, a contemporary of Marcus Aurelius. But the conclusions about authorship on many such works is quite recent. What is most important, however, is that we are able to uncover so many of the order's historical tracks. Thus, its leaders are understood to have built carefully on a known traditional framework. The Hermetic Qabalah today bears the marks of Westcott and Mathers. Even the spelling of the Hebrew word Qabalah, with a Q, was chosen by Mathers as being more consistent with the original language. And the Kabbalistic correspondences found in Aleister Crowley's 777 appears to be based largely on Mathers' work. It is with the Order of the Golden Dawn that the modern system of path colors on the Tree of Life, see following section, and other attributions first appear. The order developed an elaborate system of teaching based on ritual, although the extent to which the well-known banishing rituals may be theirs is uncertain. At least such rituals are not found in Agrippa, Barrett or other magical treatises prior to the Golden Dawn. Here again, the ways in which an oral tradition may have been involved cannot be determined. Historical evidence notwithstanding, the story of Christian Rosenkreuz unquestionably taps into some secret tradition. It certainly relates to the same universal patterns symbolized by the tarot. The Hermetic emphasis of the Golden Dawn on the Egyptian gods was partly social and partly traditional. In late 19th century England there was great curiosity about anything mysterious and obscure, the science of archaeology being still in its infancy. In 1900, for example, no Greek art prior to the Parthenon was known. Emphasis on the Egyptian gods served to separate the participants in ritual from the daily routines of Victorian life. It also effected a separation from Christianity. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn affirmed the pure Renaissance Hermeticism of Ficino. Philosophically, the system of Egyptian gods is very comfortably equated with the Kabbalah. Despite the apparent proliferation of gods and goddesses, Egyptian religion was monotheistic. All of the gods were aspects or modifications of one ultimate and original deity. Moreover, like the Kabbalah, the Egyptian pantheon shows different aspects of the same god under different circumstances. For example, there are many forms of Horus, all of which have the name Heru embedded in its Egyptian name, such as Horus the Child, or Blind Horus, Horus at the head of sightlessness, or Horus of the two horizons, whom the Greeks called Hermeticism as opposed to Harpocrates. Horus is child who is the center of our known universe in the Kabbalah, and to whom we refer in a variety of ways. And as the child appears in a variety of ways, so do the Great Father and the Great Mother. All of this was clearly understood by the Golden Dawn, who found considerable utility in the Egyptian system of gods. These gods express universal relationships better than any other pantheon. Today, however, the order's dependence on Egyptian gods is viewed by many students as only a curiosity of the past. The Tree of Life. The Tree of Life is intended to symbolize the entire universe, a proposition so vast in its implications that some may doubt that such a symbol is even possible. It is a deceptively simple diagram composed of 10 spheres called sephiroth and 22 connecting lines called paths. Collectively, the sephiroth and paths are called the 32 paths of wisdom. The 10 sephiroth are 1. Kether, the crown. 2. Chakma, wisdom. 3. Binah, understanding. Between Binah and the next sephira is an invisible sephira known as Doth, or knowledge. It is not represented on the tree because it is a bridge built by each individual across the abyss existing between the upper sephiroth and those below. 4. Chest, mercy. 5. Jabura, severity. 6. Tifereth, beauty. 7. Netzach, victory. 8. Had, splendor. 9. Yesod, foundation. 10. Malkuth, kingdom. The Tree of Life, used by modern Hermetic Kabbalists, was first published in Kircher's Oedipus Egypticus in 1652. And while this tree must have undergone a lengthy development, its historical roots appear buried in the secret past of mystery religions. Moreover, a general developmental sequence is difficult to establish as Jewish Kabbalists espouse different forms of the tree. The first reference to a secret tree is in the Bahar, appearing in France around 1200. If, however, one were to draw a tree on the basis of that text, only 8 of the 10 sephiroth, Binah through Malkuth, would be included, since the tree is stated to grow as it is watered by wisdom, Chakma. Something of the amorphous spirit of that first tree is found in the diagram published by Robert Flutt in 1617. Yet it is curious to find that a glyph of 100 years earlier is far more conceptually developed and sophisticated. Moreover, we find that a Jewish illustration from as late as 1708 takes a different approach, indicating its dependence on the Sefer Yetzirah. The most that can be said with certainty is that the tree of life has evolved over the centuries, following ever-increasing public interest and, not coincidentally, reflecting the perspectives of contemporary philosophy. The full-color two-dimensional tree of life is the most developed expression of the 19th century Hermetic Qabalah. If the evolutionary pattern continues, it is likely that the three-dimensional tree of life is the form under which the Hermetic Qabalah will be considered in generations to come. That tree embodies in its pillars the principle of four balanced elements, infused with a fifth element which is spirit. Concepts. The Kabbalah teaches that our universe evolved organically and sequentially, following the path of the flaming sword. From a mysterious unmanifest emerged Kether, then Chokmah, then Binah. These three formed the supernal triangle, a spiritual height bridged by the invisible Sephirah, Doth. Chest, Geburah and Tifereth formed the ethical triangle. Finally, with Netzach, Had and Yesod, the astral triangle was created. Malkuth, it will be seen, stands alone at the base of the tree, conspicuously removed from the rest, particularly when Doth is imagined at the upper point opposite Yesod. It is the recipient of the influences of all the other Sephiroth, containing the reflected perfection of Kether, while at the same time being the product of what is described as the fall. The tree of life is divided into three pillars. The Sephiroth on the right side are on the pillar of mercy, those on the left, the pillar of severity, and those at the center, the middle pillar. Each Sephirah is perfectly balanced by its opposite. Moreover, each path is the perfect balance between the two Sephiroth which it connects, and of the path opposite it. This glyph is a compound symbol which may be considered at two levels. It is the individual, the microcosm, God in miniature, and the macrocosm, the greater universe in the image of which the individual is created. Each Sephirah is related to some part of the human body, and with a corresponding part of a greater divine body. The principle involved is expressed by the axiom which we will often repeat, as above, so below. There are a number of areas of traditional Kabbalah which may be somewhat confusing, but which are actually very simple. One of these areas is the application of man to the tree, and involves two separate concepts. The first concept is that of Adam Kadmon, the grand old man of the Zohar. Adam Kadmon is all 10 Sephiroth, a great organic unity, a spiritual body in which each of us might be considered a single cell, carrying all of the potential attributes of the whole. Adam Kadmon should not be confused with Arik Anpin or Zaur Anpin, the other two personifications covering more than one Sephirah. Arik Anpin means the vast face or countenance, Zaur Anpin means the lesser face or countenance. Arik Anpin is macroprosopis, an anthropomorphization of the Sephiroth of the supernal triangle. Zaur Anpin is microprosopis, the five Sephiroth around Tifereth. Together they illustrate the principle of as above, so below. To reiterate, Adam Kadmon means the whole tree of life pictured as a man. Arik Anpin is the man above, Zaur Anpin is the man below. The idea of each part of the human body having some divine correlate is perhaps more readily comprehensible to an Easterner than a Westerner. The yogi has no difficulty dealing with the concept of certain centers of spiritual activity within the physical body. The solar plexus is the sun center in man, a link between the individual and the solar powers of the universe. The physical center has the potential to be enervated, consciousness transferred to it, and the individual brought into direct contact with the pure energy which is, in the Kabbalistic system, called Tifereth. An important part of practical work with the Hermetic Qabalah involves the exercise of the middle pillar, where the energies of the Sephiroth are purposely invoked and built up within the individual. In this exercise the Sephiroth are reversed, that is, chest is at the left shoulder, and Geburah is at the right, since they are considered subjectively within the body, rather than being viewed from outside. Practical work on the tree also involves traveling the paths connecting the Sephiroth, the objective centers of energy. The paths are the subjective experience of passing from one Sephiroth to the next. But insofar as there is a constant flow and motion within the universe, there is a constant flow as energy passes down from one Sephirah to another and up again. The universe is like a gigantic circuit, where power flows into Kether from the unmanifest, down through the tree and up again. There is a continual renewal of energy. Thus, when viewed from another frame of reference, the paths may be considered objective. They are subjective for us, yet they are objective in that they carry a constant flow of energy of such specificity as to be expressible as the major arcana of the tarot. In other words, we can study the tree of life intellectually, or build it in ourselves. We can approach the tarot cards symbolizing the paths from within or without. When the cards are used individually for astral projection, they are graphic and subjective symbols of that which is experienced on the paths between the Sephiroth. Here they might also be described as that which is required to pass from one Sephiroth to the next. They define stages of personal development. On the other hand, when the trumps appear in a divination, they are viewed from without and are objective forces affecting the question. A large number of these trumps, appearing in a spread, shows forces entirely beyond the control of the querent. Path working, particularly when it involves the tarot cards, has a high degree of mystery and romance attached to it, as does all astral projection, but the experiences are very practical. To be of any use, the inner lessons must be applied to our everyday lives. The whole process of spiritual development involves a bringing into balance of the component parts of the personality so that it may function in conscious cooperation with the higher self. But when this process is described by the mystery schools in terms of the four elements, fire, water, air and earth, it may sound remote and mysterious. It is not. We grow by learning perfect control over ourselves within our chosen environment, to the point that we are no longer at the mercy of that environment. This is a spiritual suicide mission for the personality and for the whole concept of self as it exists within an incarnation. This is a process which is natural to everyone, but which is accelerated by focusing attention on it. The tree of life imposes a defining pattern on qualities of the personality and work of personal development, which is already in progress. Thus, one feels affinities or antagonisms towards certain tarot cards, depending upon the extent to which their lessons have already been learned. By purposely studying and using the paths, we take hold of our own spiritual learning process, forcing attention to many important paths which we might otherwise choose to avoid. The fact that the Kabbalah demands attention to all parts of a given whole makes it an ideal system for intentionally affecting spiritual growth. It demonstrates that we exist in a rational and graded system. It suggests where we come from and where we go. There is none of the vagary of other systems. And, as the symbolic parts of the human body are related to the tree, so are the various aspects of the soul. We go from the lowest aspect of manifestation to the highest, the O.T.O of Kether, the primal point to which we aspire. All major religions teach that it is our heritage to return to some primal point from which we evolved. This is expressed as heaven, or nirvana, or whatever is the ultimate happy state promised by the faith. But of all the metaphysical systems available in the West, only the Kabbalah suggests the extent to which we progress through a natural course of development, as if through a school, moving from one grade to another. The divisions of the soul. Note here that the neshama of Binah defines the entire supernal triangle, in the same way that Binah's planet, Saturn, is also taken to mean the three upper Sephiroth. The scheme shown here is that taught by the Golden Dawn. Later writers such as Fortune and Case perceived a problem in that the animal instincts given to Malkuth were better related to Yesod. Ruach, i.e. microprosopis, lesser countenance, was divided into upper and lower, higher self and personality. In the order of the Golden Dawn, the members were graded according to the highest Sephira, to which they had been ritually advanced. 0 equals 0 meant that the candidate was initiated into basic membership, 1 equals 10 meant that he had taken the first initiation of the 10th Sephira, Malkuth and the spiritual element of earth, 2 equals 9 signified initiation into Yesod, the 9th Sephira and the realm of air, 3 equals 8 meant the initiation of Hod and the element of water, 4 equals 7 meant initiation into Netzach and fire. These four ritual steps symbolized the introduction of the candidate into the mysteries of matter. Theoretically, each new initiation meant control over one of the key aspects of the personality. 5 equals 6 was the initiation into the inner order and the mysteries of Tifereth. This also heralded the true enlightenment of the seeker. These initiatory rituals demonstrate the process by which the higher consciousness unfolds and may be related to the very symbol of mankind, the pentagram. The four lower arms are the balanced forces of the elements. The topmost point is the spirit functioning through the elements. It should not, of course, be supposed that an initiatory ritual always brings a miraculous change in the individual. The real changes are the result of a sacrament within, stimulated by the sacrament without. And it might be safe to assume that very few members of the Order of the Golden Dawn were really adepts in the true sense of the word. Secret paths. The idea of paths which are secret or hidden seems to have been introduced, or at least popularized, by Paul Case. There is no evidence of the Golden Dawn having schematized any paths other than the traditional 32. Actually, the secret paths are nothing more than the connection of every Sephira with every other Sephira, suggesting that it is possible to move directly from any form of consciousness to any other. This theory is a mitigation of the idea implied in the usual tree of life diagram, that we must pass through one sephira before we encounter another. The concept of secret paths definitely expands the possibilities of the tree. It also allows us to see certain relationships which would not be obvious otherwise, such as the derivation of the universal hexagram from the tree itself. This figure was first published by Aleister Crowley, who undoubtedly derived it in this way. In A Tree of Life drawn by Crowley and published in the 1955 Neptune Press edition of 777, we discover that Crowley has shown all lines between Sephiroth required to make that figure. Negative limitless light. Kabbalistic teachers repeatedly stress that the Tree of Life represents our manifest universe. This emphasis is placed to express the idea that behind even the most exalted aspects of our universe lies an unmanifest, which is the ultimate source of all and which cannot be known to us. The unmanifest is symbolized by the words negative limitless light, or in Hebrew Ein Sof Or. It is shown on the Tree of Life, above Kether, as three curves of radiating light. The outer curve is Ein, the middle Ein Sof, and the innermost Ein Sof Or. These are understood to be veils separating the outpouring of our universe from that from which it emerged. From behind these veils energy flows constantly down to us through Kether. While there are points of reference to all aspects of the Tree of Life in the tarot, no such reference is made to the Ein Sof Or. The tarot, whose letters are frequently transposed to form the word Rota, shows the wheel of the manifest universe. The four worlds. The Kabbalah describes these as divided into four separate worlds, each of which is represented by one letter of the divine name, or tetragrammaton. The first is Atzilith, the archetypal world, the world of pure spirit, which activates all of the other worlds which evolve from it. Here are attributed the gods of the Sephiroth and the letter Yod, primal fire. The second world is Braya, the creative world, the level of pure intellect, of the archangels and of He, primal water. The third is Yetzirah, called the formative world because here are found the subtle and fleeting patterns behind matter. It is the realm of angels and of primal air, symbolized by the letter Vau. The final world is Asaya, the active world containing both the physical world of sensation and the unseen energies of matter. It is the realm of the cherubim, the final head of the divine name and primal earth. Each of these worlds generated the energies beneath it, with the universe becoming increasingly dense as it evolved from nothingness to matter. The unmanifest produced the Kether of Atzilith, and following the path of the flaming sword sequentially, from Sephira to Sephira, from one world to the next, completion was reached in the Malkuth of Asaya, creating 40 Sephiroth in all. Purists, those who insist that the earlier ideas on the Kabbalah are more legitimate than those of more recent Kabbalists, tend to espouse a one-tree attribution. However, this is an excellent example of the ways in which the Kabbalah has grown as a descriptive system over the centuries. The four-tree attribution is the best for tarot interpretation. 4 color scales, one for each world, are accepted by the Hermetic Kabbalah. The king, queen, emperor and empress, answering respectively to the sequence of the worlds and the tetragrammaton. The notion of color is pivotal to the study of tarot, and painting the 4 worlds in their appropriate colors will provide special insights about the cards. The Golden Dawn Tarot, as published, includes the traditional Tree of Life used for practical work. Here are shown the colors of the Atzilith paths and the Sephiroth colors of Braya. There must always be a balance of masculine and feminine in representation involving the tree, and this is accomplished by combining the 2 scales in one glyph. In our discussion of the 4 worlds, we have chosen the term primal to describe fire, water, air and earth, symbolized by the letters of the tetragrammaton in the 4 worlds, in an effort to distinguish these energies from other forms of elements described on the tree. But in each individual world, Yod, fire is also attributed to Chakma, He, water to Binah, Vau, air to Tifereth and He final, earth to Malkuth. We propose to describe these subdivisions of the primal elements as specific elements. Thus, in Atzilith, primal fire, are 4 such specific elements. A fire, specific, of fire, primal, a water, specific, of fire, primal, an air, specific, of fire, primal, and an earth, specific, of fire, primal. In Braya, the world of primal water, there is a fire of water, a water of water, an air of water and an earth of water. The pattern follows through Yetzirah and Asaya, and is the basis for attributing the court cards to the tarot. For example, the entire suit of wands describes Apple world. Wands, therefore, are primal fire, the primal Yod. This primal fire is divided into 4 aspects, personified by the tarot. The king of wands, related to Chakma and Atzilith, is fire of fire. The Queen of Wands, related to Binah and Atzilith, is water of fire. The Prince of Wands, related to Tifereth and Atzilith, is air of fire. And the Princess of Wands, related to Malkuth and Atzilith, is earth of fire. There is also an important tertiary application of the elements found on the paths where different Hebrew letters, called maternals by the Sefer Yetzirah, are applied. Since all other letters and energies are derived from these three maternals, the elements attributed to them will be called transitional elements. The Fool is the letter Aleph and Air. But this is not the same as that which is represented overall by vow of Bria, primal air, or the vow of Tifereth, specific air. The elements of the paths are transitional, in that they are in a constant state of flow between two Sephrith. Having subjected the reader to a bombardment of terms, the suggestion that there are yet three more types of elements may be less than welcome. However, this is an area of Kabbalistic studies which has not been generally explored and which is a source of constant confusion. Let us quickly consider the other types of elements and then attempt to reach some coherent overview of them all. The elements, the fourfold division found throughout the tree of life, are rooted in Kether. Here they are undefined and unexpressed and are primordial elements. Another application of the term elements is made to the four lower Sephrith, fire to Netzik, water to Had, air to Yezod and earth to Malkuth. These are astral elements. Finally, in Malkuth, are the base elements which are the ultimate expressions of those first found in Kether in their primordial state. In every single application of this fluid term element, the formula of the Yod He Vav He applies. Wherever Yod appears it has fiery outgoing qualities, wherever He appears it has enclosing and fluid qualities of water, wherever Vav appears, it is the airy result of the combination of the Yod and He, wherever He final appears, it is the solidified end result of the actions of the Yod He and Vav. This pattern is really the only thing to remember, since it is applied to a variety of very different qualities. To reiterate those terms which may be applied to the so-called elements. 1. Primordial elements. Found in Kether. Undifferentiated potential. 2. Primal elements. The Yod He Vav He applied to the four worlds. 3. Transitional elements. The Yod, He and Vav which are maternals on the paths of the tree of life. 4. Specific elements. The Yod He Vav He is applied to Chokmah, Binah, Tifereth and Malkuth in any of the four worlds. 5. Astral elements. The Yod He Vav He, applied to the four lower Sephrith. 6. Base elements. Found in Malkuth, blended. The ultimate expression of the outpouring of the universe into matter. Taken together, the base elements are a subdivision of astral earth. This is an admittedly complicated scheme, but it is presented to underscore the fact that different types of energies are symbolized by the fire, water, air, earth scheme on the tree of life. The Yod of Atzilith is not commensurate with the Yod applied to the path of Shin, or Yod applied to a sequence begun in Netzik. Yet these are all described by the word fire. Again, what is really important is the sequence represented by the tetragrammaton. We might arbitrarily say, for example, that apple is fire, orange is water, pear is air and lemon is earth. In this case we would be applying a formula to describe a relationship between apple, orange, pear and lemon. If, then, the same underlying pattern is found beneath swing, chair, sofa and footstool, it should not be supposed that because both apple and swing begin the sequence, they are exactly equivalent. A description of different energies in the same way seems to be a trap set by the early Kabbalists. Kabbalistic symbolism. A symbol is of value in that it suggests something which cannot be adequately expressed in language, although language is itself a form of symbolism. More important, however, is that while on our plane of existence symbols are abstractions, they are realities on other planes. In the astral realms a symbol can be a powerful device for attracting or for repelling spiritual entities. It can be a call or a protection, in that it affirms the power of a deity governing a particular form and level of energy. When used in this way, a symbol could be defined in the same terms as a talisman on our own plane. It is essentially charged with the force which it is intended to represent. There is a vast complex of symbols attached to the Sephrith and paths. For example, Kether may be described mathematically as the point, in that it is the first emanation. As Chokmah emerges from Kether a line is formed, and with the development of Binah there is a triangle. And so, one may progress down the tree applying geometric figures according to the number of the Sephrith. Chest is a square, Jabura a pentagram, Tifereth a hexagram, etc. These are the most basic and in some respects the most profound of the symbols attached to the tree. The most complicated symbols are the Hebrew letters and the divine names written in those letters. Some may have an intuitive grasp of the extent to which the Hebrew alphabet is more than just letters. Many years ago the artist Ben Shahn published a book called Love and Joy about letters, in which he described his own feeling toward that alphabet as a child. I loved to draw and contemplate the big flowing letters, I was most at home with them, and could make them long before I could do anything else with my hands. It was such a pleasure to copy them from the prayer book because in each letter there was some subtle part of the others, and as one learned to make the new ones, he discovered those familiar parts that he already knew. A Hebrew letter, taken by itself or in conjunction with others as it forms a God name, is as much a symbol as a geometric figure. Letters and words are often visualized in practical work. To each Hebrew letter is assigned a number, and words have special meaning, according to numbers derived by what is known as Kabbalistic addition, to be discussed later. Suffice it to say here that insofar as Hebrew letters are assigned to each of the trump cards, those cards may even be used to pictorially spell divine names and give insight into the nature of the deity. This exercise serves to demonstrate the extent to which the Kabbalistic system is composed of precisely interrelated parts. One important point which must be made has to do with the constant use of color in the Hermetic Qabalah. Most people consider color symbolic, but it is not. Colors are the actual forces, not merely symbols of those forces. The same may be said for pure tone. The Sephiroth and their symbols. In the tarot, the Sephiroth are represented by the 10 numbered cards. Each suit and by the court cards which are placed on the Sephiroth, according to the principle of the Tetragrammaton. Any ace pertains to Kether, any 2 to Chakma, any 3 to Binah, etc. The court cards, as we have indicated, are placed with the kings in Chakma, the queens in Binah, the knights in Tifereth and the princesses in Malkuth. Actually, however, the court cards relate to the entire tree, and not just selected Sephiroth. The Hebrew alphabet is based on the form of the letter Yod. This refers to the idea that the entire universe derives from that which is symbolized by the Yod. Yod ultimately relates to Kether, an idea which Mathers suggests as Yod-I. But it is not until the formation of the Sephira Chakma that what we understand as the outpouring Yod force of the universe, the fiery masculine energy, is separated out and activated. Thus, for practical purposes, the Yod is attributed to Chakma, and the He, the watery feminine principle, is attributed to Binah. Vau is referred to Tifereth, but it actually encompasses all of the Sephiroth under the supernal triangle, except Malkuth, i.e., those 6 Sephiroth to which Tifereth is central, Jabura, Chest, Netzik, Had and Yezod. And when the hidden Sephira, Doth, is considered, a perfect circle is formed around Tifereth. By this point it should be obvious that applying the tarot to the Kabbalistic tree of life involves some difficult stretches of language, but the effort to understand these attributions will be well rewarded. While one may feel frustrated, if not inundated, by all of these definitions, it is important to realize that definition is what the Kabbalah is all about. It is a very clear and precise system, verbal smokescreens of the early Kabbalists notwithstanding. Insofar as the numbered and court cards of the Sephiroth are called the minor arcana, arcana means secret or mysteries, they may appear to be of less importance than the major arcana or trump cards. They are, however, of the greatest significance in that they symbolize the real potencies in ourselves and in the universe, with which we strive to come into conscious contact. If the suits, Sephiroth, appear subordinate to the trumps, paths, it is for 2 reasons. First, the tarot is a teaching device intended to assist in the subjective journey of consciousness from one objective center of energy to another. It may be the chariot which carries us down the road from one inner city to the next. Thus the paths, while ultimately less important than the Sephiroth, are the primary focus of the tarot deck. Second, as the cards are used for divination, they describe forces in transition which have brought about past events, function in the present, and have the potential to create future events. This might best be understood by considering the idea that we are all in a continual state of traveling the paths. It is an unconscious process for most, but a conscious one for those pursuing the mysteries. Moreover, we are unconsciously traveling many paths at the same moment. Our limiting concepts of time, space and form do not apply. As has been previously suggested, the choice of consciously traveling the path one by one has the effect of speeding up what would otherwise be a normal course of development. It also has the effect of speeding up the course of karmic action, so that one who becomes involved with the tarot for the purpose of learning about himself and his universe may suffer some serious personal problems at the onset. The reason for this is that a number of karmic debts are paid off at once, and the board cleared of some major impediments to understanding. The tarot is best used for divination about mundane matters. It is not particularly well suited for furnishing answers of an important spiritual nature because it is rooted in Yetzirah, although one brings down insight from higher worlds in interpretation.